Shalom, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Ginsburg of the Ezra Habonim Niles Township Jewish Congregation of Skokie, Illinois. This is a very brief primer on Jewish history. If you memorize just a few dates, you'll know the first 2,000 years in a very systematic way. Now, there's some dispute among scholars as to the exact dates, but let's just pick the date 1800 BCE before zero for Abraham, the first Jew. Okay, 1800 BCE for Abraham. And then Moses date roughly at 1250 BCE. So Moses then takes the Israelites out of Egypt, God, of course, doing all the work. Moses then wanders in the desert for 40 years. They get to the land. Moses dies, and Joshua takes them in. So then move a couple hundred years through Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and the early kings of Israel. And about 1000, date at 1000 BCE, the first king, Saul, then David, then Solomon. And in David's reign, he establishes Jerusalem in 995 as the capital of Israel. Solomon builds the Holy Temple. Now, immediately after Solomon, the northern 10 tribes split off from the southern 2 tribes and form Israel. The southern tribes are called Judah. In 722 BCE, you have the Assyrians conquering those 10 northern tribes and scattering them, and that's where we get the 10 lost tribes. So let's now review. Abraham is what date? 1800 BCE. Moses, 1250 BCE. The first kings of Israel, 1000 BCE. The Assyrian conquest of the 10 northern tribes, 722 BCE. Well, then the Babylonians, today's Iraqis, conquer the Assyrians, and they conquer Judah. They destroyed Solomon's temple, and they let the Jews go back to Babylonia, but they kept them intact where the Jews lived until now. And there they established great academies and great learning and great books like the Talmud. Well, shortly thereafter, the Persians conquered the Babylonians and let the Jews go back and rebuild the temple, and that's where we get the Second Temple period. The story of Esther, it occurs during that period. In 333 BCE, Alexander the Great, the Macedonian Greek, conquers the Persians who had conquered the Babylonians, and he died 10 years later, in 323 or so BCE. Following that, there was an internal battle between his kingdom in 2 parts. The Seleucids in the north, approximately where Syria is, and the Ptolemies in the south, where Egypt is. And that culminates in the Hannukah story about 165 BCE. And for 100 years, after Judah drove the Syrian Greeks back to Syria, they had sovereignty over the Promised Land until the Romans took over about 63 BCE. So let's review these 2,000 years. What date do we have for Abraham? 1800 BCE about. What date for Moses? 1250 BCE. For the early kings of Israel, Saul, David, and Solomon, 1000. The Assyrian conquest of the 10 northern tribes, 722. The Babylonian destruction of the temple, conquering of Judah, 586 BCE. The Persians, 4th century. Alexander the Great, 333. Hannukah, 165. There you have it, about 2,000 years of history in just a couple of minutes. Learn these dates and you'll feel so much comfortable about this basic piece of our Jewish historical experience.